Time to pull up a chair. We've got another great story for you today in the rLounge. Sometimes it's only ever someone else's fantasy, and we're just the supporting actors. Today on rLounge, a toast to shattered illusions. Up first, nothing says I love you quite like a cake to the face. My soon-to-be ex-husband humiliated me on our wedding day and met his karma instantly. It has been 2 days since my wedding day. I had already been with him for 4 years, 1 year of which I was engaged. It all started a few months earlier when I noticed my husband Jake watching prank videos. Among other things, these videos showed embarrassing photos of the bride being played on a projector in front of the whole room of the bride's face being smashed into the cake. I told him straight away that I didn't want anything like that at our wedding. He just laughed and said that he wasn't planning anything like that. I thought that was the end of it, but I kept catching him making strange arrangements with his friends. He suddenly wanted to choose the wedding photographer and the cake. I thought nothing of it and was just glad that he was helping me with the wedding preparations. Nevertheless, I reminded him the day before that if he did something like that, I would break up with him immediately. When the day of the wedding came, everything went smoothly until the ceremony. Until the moment came when the cake was to be cut. The whole room watched as I made the first cut and the photographer stood in front of us with a camera in hand. Suddenly, I felt a hand on the back of my head pushing me face first into the cake. Not only my makeup, but the whole wedding dress was ruined and the whole room laughed, my husband the loudest. At that moment, the photographer took the photo and Jake said that this was now our wedding photo. I turned around, slapped him in the face, and ran out of the room in tears. Thank God karma didn't take long to arrive and came in the form of his own brother. I ran to the toilet and started crying when I suddenly heard loud shouting from the hall. It was his brother Frank. I could barely understand what he was saying, and when I left the toilet, he was waiting for me. He told me that Jake had something to tell me. Jake was shaking and apologized without looking me in the eye. Frank told him to look me in the eye and apologize again. Even I was a bit scared of Frank at that moment, because I had always thought of him as a kind and gentle man. I had never seen him angry before. Jake apologized again, and then Frank led us back into the hall, which was suddenly very quiet, and most of our family looked down at the floor a little embarrassed. The festivities were cut short, and I was taken home by Frank because I was too angry with my husband and I didn't want to see him. During the ride, Frank apologized for blowing up like that. He explained that my husband was horrible even back when he was a brother and used every special occasion to humiliate Frank. When it was Frank's birthday, my husband would throw his cake at him and break his presents. But back then, their parents always brushed it all off by saying that that's just how brothers behave, so he had to endure every humiliation. But when he saw my husband bury my face in my cake, he was fed up because he realized that my husband was just a bad person who got a satisfaction from humiliating others. I asked Frank if he thought it would be an exaggeration if I separated from my husband, and he said no, because according to him, I deserved better, and he didn't care how his brother felt about it because he had brought it on himself. Then he told me that if I needed help collecting my things, he would help me and gave me his number. And I decided to separate from him and file for divorce and inform Jake and my family about it. Jake just told me not to do that because it was just a harmless prank. I was spammed by both his family and mine that it would be ridiculous to end our marriage over this, but I see it differently. If he does something like this to me despite multiple requests not to do it, even after promising he wouldn't do it, then I can't trust him. No matter what he promises me, I have to assume that the opposite can and will happen, and that he doesn't care at all how I feel about his decisions. This situation can be projected onto so many much worse situations where it would be important for me to be able to trust him. His brother Frank seems to be the only one who supports me now, and I will go through with the divorce. Call me humorless, call me what you want, but I have given my reasons. Now we've got a quick relevant couple of comments. First one, stay strong. Honestly, I'd go no contact with those that are gaslighting you. They are disrespectful too. Hugs. The OP replies, it's hard going no contact with most of my family members, but I thought about keeping Frank around as a friend, even if he's the brother of my ex. It's interesting that you would choose to marry Jake even before all of this. Surely his need to prank you would have been the cherry on top of the red flags you chose to ignore. Moreover, Frank really seemed to have taken a liking to you. It sure was a smooth way to give you his number and sneak his way into your phone. Update, January 8th, 2024. Many of you asked for an update, so here it is. Read the original post if you haven't already done that. Many of you pointed out that I could get an annulment. Don't ask me why I didn't think of this earlier, but after you guys pointed it out, I planned on doing that. Haven't done it yet, but it will happen the next few weeks. It will probably be much more easier than a divorce. With that being said, what happened now? So a day after I wrote the original post, I went to Jake's apartment to get my stuff. I slept over at my best friend's house in the meanwhile. Of course, I also took up Frank's offer to help me getting my stuff. When we arrived there, he pleaded with me that it was just a prank and he didn't mean to hurt me. But the only thing I could think about is how he broke my trust before and how I couldn't trust him now if he told me he didn't mean to hurt me. When he saw Frank, his face turned red and he yelled at Frank and accused him of poisoning me against him. Don't worry, Jake. You did this yourself. He argued with Frank for a while and Frank confronted him with everything he did to him during their childhood. He told Frank to grow a pair and that he should forget about what happened back then. Ironic when he's the one who never changed and is just as bad as before. He constantly tried to talk to me, but Frank stood in his way and talked over him. And when we left, I saw how he angrily smashed the door. Apparently, he now spreaded lies to his family that Frank tried to steal me from him. Luckily, I was able to see who he really was before it was too late. What a coincidence that after this incident, my family spammed me with messages as well about how we should talk to a therapist instead of breaking up over this. They only stopped when I threatened to cut them off too. I also didn't plan to share this with you, but so many people suggested it that I thought I could at least ask him. So after we got my stuff, I asked Frank out, but he rejected me, telling me that he's already dating someone else. I just wanted to tell you this so you can stop asking. But honestly, I'm also kind of glad that that was his answer, because it means he didn't just help me because there was a malicious intent behind it, but more because he is simply a good person. Regardless, I told him about my post here and Frank told me he read many of your comments. He said he liked your comments and that you made his day. I thought you might want to know this. This is probably the first and last update of this. I just want to get this behind me and look forward. But thank y'all for your support. Edit. If you want to call my story fake because I asked Frank out, feel free. I just acted on what many of you asked me to do, and I thought to myself that asking him once doesn't hurt anyone and maybe lead to a much healthier relationship if he said yes. I'm not in the best state of mind and will now leave this account be, so don't be surprised if I don't respond anymore. My story will stay here and hopefully raise awareness for many people who are in similar situations with toxic partners, no matter if they're male or female. I wish you all the best. Now let's get a couple comments from the community. First up, if you do that, it's over. Okay, does the thing. It's over. It's just a prank. You're overreacting. Next comment. It's just so dangerous. Lots of cakes have dowels and skewers in them holding them up, and you can basically impale someone through the skull doing that. You know, besides the disrespect, disregard, etc. Way to love someone. Someone else says, all I can think of is a skewer going straight through the bride. Those tears usually have supports. Would it have been a harmless, funny prank then? Jesus. One more person says, as a baker, this is what freaks me out when I hear about cakes being smashed in people's faces. Oh, I hadn't even thought of the skewers that hold together the cake. That could have been messy. Yikes. Also, you say you weren't in the best of state of mind and yet you still asked Frank out shortly after you were supposed to marry his brother. That's awfully fast. Sounds like this marriage was doomed from the start. Were you and Jake ever really in it for the right reasons? What do you think of all this? Next up, a sister who thinks the world should pay for her dream life. Sister expects family and friends to fund her baby and her wedding. Sorry for grammar mistakes. I'm not native English. Also, this is my first contribution, so hopefully I did it right. This has been going on for many years and started off with my sister telling me she wanted to have kids. Up until then, she had always told me that she thinks her boyfriend would make a horrible dad. When she had told me that they were thinking about having a baby, they had just bought an apartment and were apparently pretty tight on money. They also had just bought a $30,000 Mercedes-Benz 2-seater, not really a family car. I said I'd be happy to be an aunt, but if she didn't think they should save up a bit as kids are really expensive. She looked at me and said, "Why? Kids don't cost anything till at least primary school." I was baffled and asked where she got that from, and she answered, "The first couple of years family pays for everything." Not gonna happen. Our family consists of only my parents, my sister, and me, and there's no way I fund her baby for 6 years. They didn't have a baby after all and for another 5 years, but she was using this for making us feel bad all the time. Once she had said her dream was going on a trip to New York, but her boyfriend wouldn't set foot on a plane. So my mom and I talked about it and agreed on taking her to New York, and I told my sister a couple weeks after she had mentioned it. She got really mad, screaming at me how mean I was and how I could be so unconsiderate because I knew she wanted a baby and can't go to New York pregnant. And after all, she denied having ever said she wanted to go to New York. Years later, they finally decided to get married, still no baby, she asked me to be her bridesmaid. Since our relationship has been deteriorating over the years, I wasn't too happy about it, but said yes for my mom's sake. It started right at that minute. She said I would have to buy a book on how to be a bridesmaid, so I knew what I had to do. The book alone cost $30. Plus, when my mom told her that she would take her to Neapol to buy a dress, what she had said was her dream couple years ago, she got upset and mad, saying that we should know she couldn't go into a store to buy a dress because of scars on her arms and that, of course, she had never said she wanted to go to Neapol. Well, the following weeks, she went dress shopping by herself, into shops, trying them on, and sent a lot of pictures of her trying on dresses, so obviously it was a lie. Furthermore, she expected all her guests to give them money as a wedding gift, which isn't too unusual. She, however, invited family, friends, coworkers, just anybody she knew or hardly knew, so she would get enough money to pay for the wedding. She literally said the guests have to pay for a wedding, and she wanted to have a $40,000 wedding with everything you can think of. I didn't feel welcome at all, knowing she just wanted money and that a certain amount was expected. Fortunately, I didn't have to bother in the end because I finally broke contact with her after all those years of lying and bad-mouthing my parents and me with her husband's family. She was bad-mouthing them with us as well all the time, saying her sister-in-law was a drug addict. As far as I know, the wedding took place and they had a baby. She doesn't have any friends because she treated them the same way she treated us. The only people she has left are members of his family that she always said she doesn't like. But even from his family, there are people that want nothing to do with her anymore. Still makes me sad, as I always thought of her as my best friend and I really wanted to be an aunt to her children someday. But after finding out what she was saying about me, for example, I would be a bad aunt and wouldn't be allowed near her children, saying the same about my parents, etc. I'm glad I finally had the guts to say this is enough. One quick comment from the community. She has pecuniary delusions and transactional relationships. OP responds, I just learned yesterday that my parents paid for her visit to their place for New Year's. She told them they definitely needed a 2-bedroom apartment because their relationship wasn't good and they didn't sleep in one bed. So my parents paid the more expensive apartment for them. Turns out they slept in one room, and when they were in town, she and her husband were holding hands. I feel bad for my parents. On the other hand, she's done similar things for the last 15 years, and they should have known. Yikes. Sounds like your sister was getting married just for the sake of getting married. And then she went and had a baby with the guy she can't even stand, thinking it was going to be a piece of cake. I want whatever she's on. She's living in the best, most cushiony delusion where everything is fine and dandy and family is your own personal ATM. Not only that, but the comment is exactly right. Relationships are transactional for her. Sorry to burst your bubble, OP, but she was never your best friend. Do you know anyone like OP's sister? Share your experience. Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click that notification bell before you leave. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's topic, so feel free to leave a comment. See you next time in the rLounge.